Hello.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Red Web, the superhero culture talk show where we talk about current events and superhero comics, and we roll it all together with a little bit of snark and wisdom. All right, I don't know how much wisdom, but you'll definitely get the snark. I am one of your hosts, Brad West, and of course, Miss Anastasia and Greg are here today to help me along. Today we're talking about pandemics. This is like probably the most topical thing that we could have thought of. We're like, what's really going on in the world right now? Like, you know what? Is everybody being stuck inside and quarantine, et cetera, et cetera. So we picked some really good plague / pandemic, epidemic diseases in comic books. And we tried this last week. For those of you who were here and had a little bit of fun with our major technical difficulty, you got to see a little of the inner workings of the back side of this show. So we consider that a bonus. Yeah. We meant to do that. But this week, we've got the real show for you. We're going to talk about some of our favorite storylines. And just to clarify for anybody who didn't see it last week, we are not doing zombie storylines because, like I said before, that's low-hanging fruit plus it's overdone. And, if you want to watch, read, learn about, people surviving, Holocaust and zombie things and rebuilding
that
society.
That could be a 5-episode arc.
Yeah, that would be its whole thing. And kind of all of us are kind of like, meh. Zombies. But we are going to do at least one non-traditional superhero story, Why the Last Man, and that's actually a really good cool one. It's a different take on the post-apocalyptic genre, and it's really well done. We are going to do a couple of our favorite ones.
It's going to be a TV show.
And so we're going to review that comic a little bit, maybe get you excited for the FX on Hulu, you said, coming up in...
Yeah, it's going to be on Hulu or on FX on Hulu.
Sometime, depending, we don't know what the
it got postponed because of the pandemic, so we don't know when the exact date was. It was supposed to be 2020, was supposed to be the air date, but it got bumped because of the pandemic.
Oh, so, ironies.
Yeah, a pandemic show gets being shoved back because of a pandemic.
And for your main universes, I'm gonna of course talk my Spider-Man today. Spider Island Dan Slott's his first major crossover story that really set up for why people like me are fans of Dan Slott's writing, because it's very well developed and very intricate and very true to Spider-Man history. And Miss Anna was tasked with the daunting labor of reading the Batman 4-part that is Contagion / Catastrophe / No Man's Land.
Dude, daunting is a very light way to put it. It's about No Man's Land by itself is a conservative 40 issues.
Yeah. It was a thing. So.
It was exciting.
We might touch on X-Men Legacy a little bit. It was one that we originally had lined up, and it's a good storyline to touch on, but it was less a storyline and more a plot element that echoed through almost a decade of X-Men comics. So it's very hard to pinpoint down a specific. There are some story arcs that like specifically deal around that, but as far as a beginning and an end, that one's a rough one.
Yeah.
So starting off, we're going to touch on, and just to let you know, we're going to attack each of these stories in a kind of scientific method. We're going to tell you the plot of the storyline. We're going to give you an idea of the interesting, fun things that happen with it, how they handled it, and then we're going to discuss, maybe what are the real world reflections in here? What are we seeing now? Has fiction come to life? And also, is there anything we can learn from this that maybe we can apply to the world today and how we're dealing with the COVID problem? So, starting with Spider Island. Spider Island is Dan Slott took over. There were a few writers after Straczynski left with the infamous One More Day storyline that erased Peter Parker and Mary Jane's marriage. It did not erase their entire relationship, however, and that's important to remember in this storyline. The setup for this is One More Day erased everybody's memory of Peter Parker being Spider-Man. He releases his identity to the public during the original Civil War storyline, and they undid it. And part of
the biggest reason for One More Day was to bring Aunt May back because Aunt May got shot.
Oh no, Aunt May was shot as the plot device to give them an excuse to make the deal to erase it. Everything was done. Yeah, it's.
That was the only reason why he did it.
Yeah.
I didn't know
In story, he did that because Aunt May got shot because whatever. But the point is we get we get to Spider Island, and we basically got Brand New Day leads into One More Day and leads into Big Time. Big Time is Dan Slott setting up Spider-Man's new status quo. Big Time was really fun because for once Spidey is legitimate. He's got a good job at a high-tech scientific research firm that gives him access to be Spider-Man whenever he wants to, and he uses the excuse of Spider-Man tests my inventions for me, as why him and Spider-Man are like so intricately linked. And of course he uses the inventions that he has as Spider-Man fighting crime, and that's how he sells those inventions to the laboratories to make money and support himself. And this gives him the ability for the first time to be on the Avengers. He is part of the Fantastic Four. He has a new girlfriend in police detective Carly Cooper, and everything is going Spidey until villains from the past. So for those of you who are familiar with the Clone Saga, and for better or for worse, the Jackal, Miles Warren, I got him over at Mr. Taylor here, the super scientist who created the clones of Spider-Man, wakes up the dead Kane clone who sacrificed himself in the Grim Hunt storyline, and goes about restarting his cloning business. However, he's approached by a mysterious figure who later is revealed to be the Queen, a previous Captain America / Spider-Man villain. And their shtick is this. They take DNA from Peter from when he was the other and had his other powers, and that's a whole other story in itself. But they use DNA from Peter to create genetically altered bed bugs. Yes, as gross as it sounds. In fact, there's a lead-up storyline in the backup pages for a good 5 issues before the story itself starts called Infestation. And you get actually the play-by-play from the Jackal's point of view, how he's infecting these bugs and then putting bombs of bed bugs all over Manhattan and releasing them onto people who unsuspectedly are getting bitten by these bed bugs who have Peter Parker's DNA and are randomly being given spider powers. So here's Spidey in Manhattan, and all of a sudden, random people start popping up with Spider-Man powers. They're everywhere from civilians who are now swinging across the street to villains are getting extra powers to other superheroes are starting to have bizarre spider-like powers. And all the while, Peter has lost his spider sense. So Madam Web, the psychic connection to the web of life or whatever, starts training him to fight these things. And it gets really crazy. It's actually super fun. I love the story. He brings in everybody from Kane, the clone, to Venom and Anti-Venom, and everybody has some kind of part to play in here. And even some of the superheroes have fun little adventures on their side. Anya Corazon, Spider-Girl, gets her powers full time because she'd already had magical powers. The infection actually turned her normal. But then that's where it goes wrong. All of these spider people start turning into giant mutant spider monsters. And the Queen, whose basic shtick is, she is able to psychically control anybody who's had the vestigial insect / arachnid DNA in their body activated. It's a fun scientific theory. You know, they have the lizard brain. There's also a theory that we all have a subset of DNA, junk DNA, that is insectoid, and that every human has this like insectoid DNA. So basically what she does is she activates it, and then she becomes the Queen and psychically controls everybody. So basically the plot is she wants to turn everybody into spider monsters so that she can take over the minds and rule the world. That's kind of easy enough as it is. It's really fun. Lots of fun things came out of it. I love the part where they acknowledge Peter and Mary Jane's prior relationship. And Mr. Fantastic is trying to explain why, of all the people infected, Mary Jane hasn't had any of the bad side effects. She gets the spider powers, and she's awesome at it, but she doesn't turn into a spider monster. And basically, Mr. Fantastic tries to very delicately tell them, well, it was because of your special relationship and all of the time that you and Peter fills it in with shared a toothbrush. And it just cracks me up every time. And Mr. Fantastic's, yes, all the times you shared a toothbrush, Mary Jane is it has an immunity to the spider powers. I also love that he reached back into what was the issue where she got the web bracelets?
There was a Valentine's special.
And Venom was after her.
I don't remember Venom being after, but basically at that point, Spider-Man was an Avenger, and Mary Jane and Spider-Man were living in the Avenger Tower.
Okay, so that was up there.
And so they were living there, and with Iron Man's help, they made Spider-Man web shooters that were bracelets that she could wear.
They were very stylish. You know, she was still a model at the time.
And so it was really kind of cool because that issue, they go out and he's teaching her how to use them and stuff, and they actually prank Johnny Storm, who of course is one of Peter Parker's favorite, best friends in the superhero community.
Aww.
And he was like, Peter, it was really hilarious.
Oh, that's so cute.
But they never touched on it after that until Spider Island.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things I was like, this is such an awesome thing. Why are they not messing with this?
Yeah, he went back and does a lot of that's one of the reasons I like Dan Slott. He went back and used a lot of the history and the lore and brought things back up. And fun new things too. I mean, there was a lot of tie-ins that were really cool. Like there was the I Love New York issue where it was just like random people just showing like what happens to these random people with these spider powers. And one of them was a cat that got spider powers. So there's this whole silent issue, but it's this cat like fighting pigeons. And, it was cute. And
the most important time.
Yeah, right. it was cool. I love the Hercules. So at the time, Hercules had taken over for Hulk's comic book. Hulk was in space, and so Hercules had taken over as Incredible Hulk. And he actually he goes to help the X-Men fight on Spider Island, and because he's magical, the curse affects him differently. So instead of turning into a big ugly spider monster, he turns into like a centaur spider, where he's got like the upper body of Hercules, and he's still buff and hairy and hunky and everything, but he's got the spider body. So the goddess Arachne, actually the goddess Arachne comes to see him, and because she senses him and she's turned on, and it's really amusing because he basically defeats her by having spider sex with her. And while the rest of the X-Men are tied up in spider webs, including Emma Frost, who's a certified sex therapist, everybody else, especially Wolverine, is just like grossing out. They're like, oh my God, oh. And Emma Frost, not my favorite character, but my favorite scene for her ever in any comic book. She's just like very clinically fascinated by like watching two spider monsters do it. And
God!
And she's like taking notes, and it's really, really kind of funny. You have everybody from they get the Heroes for Hire when Misty Knight was running them, and Paladin turned into a spider monster. It was really cool. So many fun moments, so many little tie-ins, and it really was a good storyline. They've tried to adapt it a couple of times. I think they did a really poor job of adapting it into the most recent Spider-Man cartoon on Marvel. They actually did the Spider Island storyline where they made it an airborne virus. I guess maybe that's less gross in kids' cartoons than bed bugs. I don't know. And of course, they left a lot of the more salacious elements out of it. But it was actually kind of fun because, in addition to it being its own story, one of the fun things about Dan Slott is he's always setting up for the next storyline. And Kane, having come back to life and being the first real test subject for the cure that they created, combining the anti-venom antibodies with other elements, it becomes the next Scarlet Spider. So that leads to him into his series, which I think is really fun. And also it leads into the next major Spider-Man story arcs coming out of that. You even got hints of Superior Spider-Man, because this is the first time it shows Peter using the Octobots to deliver the cure across the city. I went back and reread some of them. I'd forgotten that that Anansi was introduced into the Marvel Universe for the first time, and he actually was in the bar with Hercules. He apparently orchestrated for Hercules to go and get caught with the bedbug bite so that he could distract Arachne, and Anansi, being the storyteller, actually snuck into Arachne's lair and stole her tapestries so he could have her stories. And this was actually to help him in the future fight for the Spider-Verse, which was coming up. So there were already elements of Spider-Verse, Superior Spider-Man. It's really cool, and I highly recommend reading it. They are in collected editions. There are 4 parts. The 4 parts, the first part does collect all of the backup stories for the infestation, so you have the lead up to it. And most of the tie-in books are set within the other 4 parts. So check those out. It starts with issue 666 is the main story start, and I love that. So we're going to talk now about you're on the spot, Batman Contagion. So Batman Contagion started off a 4-part mega arc.
Yes. So it So I just generally call it the pandemic series, but it's 3 different arcs that lead up to why No Man's Land exists. So the first one is Contagion, and it's like the reoccurring disease that happens throughout all of these is a disease called the clench, and it's just it's like I can vaguely remember the descriptions, but it's nasty and it's deadly. So this rich guy goes to one of the places that is originally infected. No reason. He's just on holiday. He comes back and they find out that this thing is starting to spread around. And so he decides that he is going to take it. He decides, okay, we need to protect all the rich people in this condominium. So they shut the entire condominium down, which was it's cute. It's Babylon Towers, I think it's called. All right. I was like, all right. And they decide to send all of the servants and everybody who works for these people away, which especially
they have to care for themselves.
Right. And I'm like, dude, considering what people know now, you can see why this is a really dumb idea, because surprise plot twist, the pilot that brought him there and back is the one who actually also got infected. So while he was trying to prevent the thing from even happening in the first place, the patient 0 has officially left and he's starting to infect people. I remember at one point, I think Robin gets infected, right?
I didn't read all of it.
Yes.
I didn't read it fully either.
Okay.
Yeah.
He gets infected.
All I remember is that it had a lot to do with, it was a plague that was created by the Order of St. Thomas.
Yes.
Azrael, the Jean-Paul Vallée Azrael was really involved in the story.
Yes, Azrael was a lot involved.
Yes, he was. And
he was
actually
the one who first contacted Batman to, warn him that it was coming.
And the reason why this story arc is so big is because this was one of the big notable crossovers. So it was Batman, Detective Comics, Azrael, and Huntress, I think.
Shadow of the Bat as well.
That, yes,
probably
also that.
In Nightwing. I know
it starts in Shadow of the Bat.
Yeah, and Nightwing was there too. It's like, so it's this big conglomerate of stuff, and it's like, and what they also do is they take it out of Gotham for a while, and they do this in Contagion and Legacy. So they realize that there might be a cure for this because there were 3 or 4 people total who survived it. So they have to go out to this one place. That person gets killed on accident because trouble just comes wherever they come.
Right.
But she survives long enough to give them their blood. And then they go to a next one who's like this like high level gangster who, because he survived this, he thinks he's immortal. And he's like, all right, let me prove how I'm immortal by stabbing myself in the neck, which obviously doesn't work. And so they get the
hubris.
Yeah, so they get the blood from him, and they manage to get the blood from the third person. And I think they actually find out that the blood doesn't work.
Oh.
Like, that's not the cure. They had some sort of magical excuse for what the cure actually was. But they managed to save Robin in time. He's not in danger anymore. And everything, it's like everything just sort of gradually starts to clear up. But we start planting the seeds of, like, some of the desperation that starts to happen.
Right.
Because there's villains like the Penguin sneaking around, and he's like, so what do you do for me if I protect you during this?
Right. And this is what sets up the government aid to like this. At this point, the government is helping Gotham.
Yes, they're trying their best.
Yeah.
And the problem would be like they would try to send help, but it would get interspersed by a bunch of people who were just like desperately trying to cling to something.
Right.
But that one ends up sort of wrapping itself up, but that starts kind of the self-doubt with everything. And so this one's a much shorter one. Legacy is the next one. And Legacy, it's the same disease, the clench, but now the person who is perpetuating it is Ra's al Ghul.
Oh, yes, of course, his whole thing.
Just because why not?
Yeah.
And he decides what he's going to do is he's going to pick a place far away and he's going to infect the water supply. And they manage to get to him before any of that stuff happens. And then, but we are building up this growing tension of the government suddenly realizing, oh God, these people are in peril a lot. How do we fix this? And we come to another one, which is Cataclysm, which is not another disease. It's just an earthquake, but it's a really, really bad one.
Right.
And there's a lot of, and throughout these stories, there was a lot of like all of these superheroes trying to do their best to maintain order, but it has become this added stress for Batman of, you know, there's not a comprehensive enemy that he can go to and punch about this. Even if he manages to get ahead of somebody, you know, the disease would still be out there. So he can't physically fight the disease. Right. He actually has to either outwit it or pull everybody together. And after Cataclysm, that's when all the villains really start to stake their claims.
Well, because the government at that point is like, enough's enough, that's your third strike. We're not helping you.
Oh, yeah. No, it's like they're getting to a point where they're sick of it. And finally, they just say, all right, you are cut off from the rest of the world. It's like, I think they blow out the bridges, right?
And they've used that for several of the stories, even the one at the back.
I just watched, what was it, 21 Bridges, like 2 days ago. So my brain is like trying to make sure I remember.
The new Harlequin series on DC that I highly suggest. It's pretty awesome. They use that whole the government leaves them alone and they blow the bridges type of thing.
But ultimately what you have is you have catastrophe, and the government's like, okay, enough is enough. You know, we're not helping y'all, and then that's what leads to no man's land.
Well, and not only a series of catastrophes, but they know Batman's there, and apparently he doesn't seem to be doing any good. And all of the villains are suddenly gaining a lot more power than they're used to. And basically on the ground, aside from watching all these superheroes fly around, the people are tearing each other apart. Back in Contagion, someone holds like a family hostage that was infected. I think it was in exchange. Yeah, it was in exchange for like the antidote or something. But it's like people are being held hostage. They're trying to do supply drops, and people are physically stealing supply drops from other people. And so they just finally say, all right, we're done. And they cut them off. And the end result is no man's land. And you guys have probably already seen a general version of what this plot is before, because that was the third movie.
Yeah,
the third Christopher Nolan movie.
And they also did I think for the last season of the Gotham TV show, did it?
Yeah. And then the new Harley Quinn movie. Or the TV show.
Yeah, the TV show.
Which I recommend. Apparently it's great.
Yes.
It's
not for kids.
But that
definitely not for kids.
Oh yeah. No. It's like they lead the commercial with her saying the F word. I'm like, don't let your kids watch this. It's like, but yeah, this growing motif that Gotham is so far gone that they can't do anything to help them, and these people are so bad, it's like basically they shouldn't have any more help, turns into no man's land. And it's Batman has fled. He decides he's feeling guilty because all the rich people are being jerks for no reason. And so he decides to come back because it's his duty to help these people. And the thing he decides to do that's very notable is he works underground and he goes to the different factions that have been divided up, defeats that faction, and then tells them, all right, here is the thing you're going to do to contribute to the community. It's like, because we're at the point where even the cops have their own little boy gang.
Yeah, I didn't read the main stories, most of it, but I did catch a few of the crossovers. I know I really liked that he seceded the Central Park to Poison Ivy.
Yep.
In exchange for helping to grow food.
Yeah.
And he basically made Penguin, being basically admitted to Penguin, you really are actually the smartest as far as, kingpins go. Whereas all of the other villains that he fight, they all have they're crazy, but
right. You
Joker's,
see him.
Yeah.
You see him spread his branches throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, so
and he does it at the beginning of Contagion, and it pays off in no man's
So he
land.
kind of gives Penguin, they're in an alliance. He's like, okay, I'm going to let you be, but you're the criminal that's going to help. And
Yep. And it's like, as he's gathering that stuff, he's also using his Bruce Wayne influence to try to reach out on the outside. And the person he gets the attention of is Lex Luthor, who is suddenly like, yes, I will help you.
I've got money. The government doesn't.
He's got money that he doesn't know what to do with, so of course he's going to help rebuild, because, just spoiler alert for anybody who didn't listen to us last week, that's what makes him president.
Yes. This will be him being president. Mm-hmm.
Just, if you had listened to me and read the books last week, you wouldn't be surprised.
So those are some really very influential comic book stories that we got. It was the first time that DC had completely sequestered all of its of a single section of the universe into its own comic books. For that entire run, every Batman book, every core Batman book, and every auxiliary, Nightwing, Robin, Catwoman, Huntress, Azrael, everybody that was in Gotham was in Gotham. They didn't cross over with anybody else. I think I have a couple of issues of Young Justice went and tried to help, and Robin more or less told them to go.
Right? It's like there was a lot of instances.
We got this. He's like, I appreciate the thought, guys, but this is tenuous as it is. And he had to try and explain to them why they couldn't help, because it would just make things worse.
Right. And there were a lot of instances where people tried to come in and help, and they were like, no, just let us deal with it. Mm-hmm. Because for a lot of people, they were so far gone, like even Huntress, which this is I think, Batman costume for funsies.
Yes.
And she enjoys it because
where she pretends to be and that's what ends up leading to the Cassandra Cain Batgirl.
Yes. It's like, but she enjoys all of the power of seeing people fear him, and the deeper and deeper that everybody was going into, they stopped fearing Batman because that's not what the situation is anymore. It's like they know it's hopeless, so they can't look up to the person.
I forgot about that part with Huntress. That was actually a pretty good part of her story arc.
Yeah, she looks very good in that costume too. Just yes.
But yeah, she had the first the one that we came to think of as the Cassandra Cain. She had the first Batgirl with the face cover costume that she gave to Cassie. Mm-hmm. Cassandra Cain, as you know, the character that they used in the Suicide Squad movie, was in the comic book actually one of the Batgirls.
In the Harley Quinn movie.
Absolutely
Harley Quinn movie.
I was like,
nothing at all like
just the same name. Just the same name.
Yeah,
right. Name. Even though there would have been a better person, but that later.
I know, right? Okay. So why The Last Man? Now this is I'm gonna pass this on to Greg so we can give you the story, but the reason that we're doing this one, it is post-apocalyptic-ish, but it's not zombie. It's really, really clever. Tell us about that one.
So why The Last Man? Basically what happens is that in the matter of seconds, every male animal on the planet dies. So we're talking humans, monkeys, lions, tigers, bears, everything. And there's only one guy and his pet male monkey are the last two male creatures on the planet.
Oh my!
This is Brian K. Vaughan, right?
Yeah.
Who if you read
and as a matter of fact, copyright there is courtesy of Dragon's Lair, and also I brought the Pandemic board game. If you haven't played it, highly suggest it.
Yes. Fun. So anyway, continue.
So after he realizes he's the last man, his mother is actually a senator. So he tries to get to Washington, but I mean, like, planes have crashed, power plants have gone down, like, because there's no men to run anything anymore.
You lost roughly 50% of the population.
So everybody's like, you know,
was it instantaneous, or was it more like just a disease?
The way it looked in the comics, it looked like it was pretty instantaneous.
Like everyone just sort of popped out of existence, or just
well,
fell
they
over
just
dead.
coughed up blood and fell over dying.
Oh, then yeah, it's one of those. Yeah, I could see everything just falling apart.
Boy, everybody's freaking out.
So
I mean,
everybody's freaking out. People are putting, like,
EMTs
are putting on gas masks, stuff like that. And his sister actually watches her fiance die in front of her, so she kind of loses her mind for a while. A lot of people losing their minds because, you know, their husbands, their you know,
children,
and all the men die. So so he, I think it takes him like 2 months to get from New York to Washington to get to his mom, and it's a pretty crazy trip there. And then they have to find a scientist to figure out why they survived, because they're talking about possible cloning to bring men back, and all this other stuff. And then there's also men on the space station, but they can't communicate with Earth because all communications are died.
Everything's gone.
So everything on the planet is gone. So
that's a cool part I didn't know about.
Yeah, so it's there's a lot of really cool, crazy things, and then there's like gangs that pop up. There's a female gang called the Amazons. They actually like burn off one of their breasts to like be like that, and they go around just, you know, destroying anything male.
Huh.
Like male statues, like they I think they try to take down the Washington Tower because it's a phallic symbol. I mean, it's just like all these things. So anyways,
but one of the things I was just kind of browsing over, I thought was interesting, we were talking about world building and stuff, that they made a good point, was the Israeli military, who is one of the most prominent in the world, even right now, that has pioneered having women in the military integrated.
In Israel, everybody has to serve, I think it's 4 years in the military.
So
even women like Gal Gadot, that's one of the reasons why she got into so much grief, was because everybody was saying that she was an Israeli soldier. And it's like, yeah,
everybody had to be
an Israeli soldier. So,
so everybody else is military.
The Wonder Woman movie was actually banned in several countries in the Middle East because she was an Israeli soldier.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just imagine, I mean, if Wonder Woman wasn't banned, and some of the kind of money that it would have made, because it already is one of the highest grossing record breakers. So,
but for Why the Last Man, though, I mean, now you've got like the majority of the countries in the world are now with like very small military forces, and you've got this other which is actually comparatively well developed.
Yeah.
So I know that they have a prominent role in it. And
there's also a Russian. There's a Russian that's in there. She actually comes over to America because she knows that the cosmonauts are going to be coming back in America, and she knows where they're going to land because they were able to get a message up or whatever. And so,
and without spoiling it, don't spoil it. Did they ever find out what caused it, or is it still mystery?
I'm not going to say.
Don't spoil. Okay,
I'm not going to say.
I
will say that it's interesting what made it to where he survived. But anyways,
I found this. I want to read it when you're click me where you read it. But yeah, the whole premise is a lot more interesting because you get your zombies and your world building and stuff like this, but this is kind of a unique premise.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. It was amazing. I haven't finished it yet, but I'm really enjoying it. I think I'm on the 4th volume, but there's 5 volumes.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and it's really, really good, and it's really good deep character build, like character studies and stuff like that, what people would deal with in these kind of situations, stuff like that. And and then the television series that's coming out, it's going to be pretty interesting. Diane Lane is actually going to be the senator.
Yeah, there's some good talent in it. Like, I really enjoyed the Hulu's Runaways. So I know Adventure, because Veronica Vaughn tends to be indirectly involved with his creative work. So I'm pretty sure he'll be one of the showrunners. So yeah, the show I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
Yeah. No, Why the Last Man? Highly suggested.
Yeah. Now, other good stories. One that we can talk about real quick. I did want to talk about the legacy virus. I can't talk about it too much because I will probably get it wrong and incur the wrath of my husband, the X-Men fanatic, because I always mess up all the X-Men
He does
stuff.
have your
Right, his
earbuds on
headphones
right
are on.
now.
His headphones are on.
Oh, he's still looking over here.
But the legacy virus, and that is one that is from the future. That Cable's clone. Okay, I got it wrong before. I thought it came back with Cable. Cable does, in fact, have a techno-organic virus that he has to use his psychic powers to keep in check. But it is not the legacy virus, which is a completely other virus.
Right, sorry, guys.
The main point of interest for the legacy virus that we really need to include it in the story is because it came out in the 90s. And there was this big push in the 90s amongst media to really put out awareness for HIV and AIDS. And so a lot of television shows had their parallels or directly addressed it or whatever. The legacy virus was meant to be in Marvel Comics. They had actually consciously meant it to be an allegory for AIDS. They were like, okay, X-Men is already used as an allegory for racism, acceptance, and stuff like that. So this is a good platform for us to put, the threat of HIV. And so they made it this kind of ongoing subplot, and different writers took it to different levels. Sometimes they made it more cartoony. Sometimes they made it legitimate threats. Originally, it was a disease that only affected mutants. And so it was passed between mutants, which of course increased the anti-mutant sentiment among some of the hate groups that many hate groups that Marvel has in place for the mutants and the X-Men and their characters and their work. In humans too. So I think the most notable part of the story is the disease had to incubate in a mutant, and it would start after their first time that they used their powers after being exposed. So once they were exposed to it, then when they use their powers, then they would become effective. So it kind of ended up when Beast finally finds a cure, it has to be done the same way. In order for it to be viable, it had to be used in a patient zero who would have the cure and had to use their powers actively to basically ignite the potency of this cure before they can pass it on to people, which meant somebody had to sacrifice themselves. Uh-huh. And Colossus is the one who ends up volunteering against many of the other characters.
It's just no.
So, yeah, it was actually really well written. It was very devastating. It was back in the day before death was like only an issue long. Now it doesn't have as much impact as it, but back then when Colossus died, he was gone for a good while before they finally found a way to bring him back, obviously. But it was a really, really well written, really good done series. And it continued on. I mean, I think it mutated a couple of times before they actually, and I still don't think they've completely eradicated it. It still periodically shows up in the X-Men books, even to this day as it being out there. So,
right, which is about average for most spreads anyway.
Yeah.
It's like it never 100% goes away unless you're really diligent about getting rid of it. It's like the flu. The flu starts for a little bit, and then it weans off, and then it pops up again.
And it mutates into a new strain.
Like some other stuff. But
one that we didn't talk about before, though, I didn't read the comic book, but I did like the FX series, was The Strain, was based on a comic book.
Oh, okay.
And that one's a Guillermo del Toro storyline.
Yeah.
That was a really fun and good one. Watch the show. I can't speak to the comic book, but very few television shows have a good track run where they stop at the right time. Strain was good because it had like 4 or 5 seasons, but the 5th season it actually wrapped up the story. It was complete. You weren't left wanting. It was gratifying. It was done, and then it wasn't cliffhangered and then left you hanging, but it didn't. They didn't rush the ending either, so that was a pretty good one. I'm hoping that's what we get out of this. It's not like Game of Thrones and other shows that people are like, you can't go on forever. So
I would really like to talk briefly about the Terrigen Mist as well.
Oh yeah,
in the Marvel Universe.
Right.
It's kind of been used in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the Inhumans show and stuff like that. But in the comics, it was really cool because the Terrigen Mist brought us some of the coolest new characters in the Marvel Universe. Of course, I'm talking about Kamala Khan, Miss Marvel, and I'm talking about Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur.
Okay.
Both of them got their powers from Terrigen Mist, and there was a time where Terrigen Mist was just flowing around the world, and it was turning people into Inhumans.
So the interesting thing you got to remember about this story is that it was from X-Men versus Inhumans. This has got some real world politics going behind it. So at the time that this story came out, Fox had the rights to the X-Men and Fantastic Four, and Marvel was actually kind of irritated with their marketing because whereas any other movie, even Sony, they would promote and they would license the characters out and they would make money in, and part of the deal with the marketing from this. So for instance, when the Spider-Man movie comes out and they make Spider-Man movie toys or whatever, or Spider-Man movie Pez or whatever, Marvel gets a cut of it. Well, Fox was not doing that. They were actually just letting Marvel spend all of the money on the merchandising to put out toys and things from the comic book. They figured, comic book Wolverine is plenty recognizable enough, and he would sell just enough for the movie. We don't have to make movie Wolverine crap anymore. So now Marvel is losing a ton of money that they're expecting in revenues from Fox, and Fox is kind of cheating the system. And so Marvel just decides, well, fine, we're just going to stop producing X-Men anything. They told their toy company the toy company was not allowed to make any more X-Men toys. Their deal with Lego, there was no more X-Men Legos, there was no more X-Men dolls, there was no more X-Men action figures. They even went so far as to remove the X-Men from things. Like they would have t-shirts printed that were the original comic book had the X-Men on them. They would actually just erase them right out, CGI them right out of the merchandise.
And also they even canceled the Fantastic Four comic.
Yep.
The Fantastic Four comic, one of the longest running comics in Marvel, they stopped it. They stopped it.
Oh my!
So, that was only part one of their strategy to try and strong arm Fox into giving them their characters back. Part two is they're like, okay, what can we use instead? This is where they made a major miscalculation because the Inhumans, for those of you who don't know, mutants born with the power, they're mutants. The Inhumans are people who have latent alien DNA in their system from being experimented on millions of years or thousands, or I don't know, back when the aliens came before humans were still cavemen. And the aliens were experimenting on the cavemen, and now there are a certain subset of people who have this alien DNA. And they get exposed to this chemical, and it ignites that alien DNA and gives them power. So similar to X-Men, but rather than being born with the power, they are given the power. And the thing with the Inhumans is they are a close forms them as a very rare resource. So they have a caste system. They only give the powers to those who have proven themselves worthy. So they have to earn it. And usually it's those who already, it's a very 1% kind of thing. They have a slave race, the Alpha Primitives, which are basically, latent cavemen. It's this whole other kind of story with different allegories, different subplots and different things. But they decide, well, on the surface, cosmetically, they have all these weird powers. They give us the excuse to make all these weird powers. Let's substitute them for the X-Men. And so they actually write the story where some of this chemical gets released into the world as this giant storm cloud. And it's going around the world. And there are humans in the population randomly who still have this latent alien DNA and get turned into these Inhumans, for better or worse. Most of them end up just causing.
And I know in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., it was killing, the Terrigen Mist killed people too.
Yes. Now, originally, the Terrigen Mist was deadly to humans, but it mutated to leave. But it couldn't work outside of the chamber. So they changed it for this. And it also was not deadly to. It wasn't originally deadly to the X-Men either, because when Wanda took everybody's powers away, Pietro, Quicksilver was actually able, because he had been married to one of the Inhumans, Crystal. He had stole some of the Terrigen crystals to reignite some of the mutant powers. So it wasn't originally deadly to the X-Men. But in order to convolute the story a little bit, and it turned out it was randomly turning some humans into superpowers. It was making some humans sick, but it was making any X-Man or mutant that was exposed to it, it was deadly to them. So it became what they called Mpox. And now you've got the Inhumans who are like, we have the right to have this out there in the world to make more Inhumans. And the X-Men are like, well, we have the right to not have it out there in the world because we need more mutants. And so they go to battle over it, and there's all kinds of politics and stuff, and it gets kind of really weird and everything. But in the end, Disney ended up buying Fox, and they got the X-Men back, and they completely abandoned.
I'm very glad that it brought us Kamala Khan and it brought us Moon Girl, who is supposedly the smartest. If you haven't read
she's so
Moon
cute
Girl,
too.
Yeah, I know. If you haven't read Moon Girl, or if you haven't read Kamala Khan, Miss Marvel, highly suggest them. Miss Marvel was incredibly well timed, in my opinion, because she's a Pakistani Muslim living in America, and so she was going through a lot of these. How should I put it? A lot of these issues about being a Muslim in America. And having to deal with the fact that there are bad Muslims and then there are good Muslims and all this kind of stuff that I think there really isn't a lot of that kind of storytelling going on, especially with the kind of prejudice that's going on now with Muslims and with
it was one of the major opportunities for, it's like I said, we have this plot device which can create random new characters. As opposed to mutants who were born with it, something a little bit different. Yeah. And it gave us the ability to diversify a lot more. Actually, the majority.
I think that's one of the things I love.
The majority of the Inhuman characters
really good about diversification.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, even way back at the beginning. I mean, there's Robbie Robertson, like I always say. There's Falcon. There's
Monica Rambeau. I'm sorry, I'm just so excited. She was my Captain Marvel. Okay, you guys. Like I've touched on this before. One of my first comments I ever got was like Secret Wars, when they actually had Monica in Secret Wars, and her being on the new Disney Plus shows. I'm just like super right. So there's
a lot of fun.
Yeah. Actually, I'm kind of really sad that Luke Cage and is not transferring over to Disney Plus, because I really want more Misty Knight, because Misty Knight. I mean,
bring him back.
No, Misty Knight or Luke Cage was like Misty Knight, man. Like,
they just gave her the fro, and I'm like,
I know. They just gave her the metal arm.
They nailed her.
They gave her all of her cool stuff, and then they're like, "Psych, it's over."
I'm
like,
we'll see. I mean, obviously the focus is to get Daredevil back in, but I mean, once they do that, I would not be surprised if they start bringing the others in.
Yeah.
Right, because a lot of them, except for one, obviously, were too charming to.
Yeah, we're actually going to talk about the Disney Plus shows here soon, because I found out that Battlestar is also going to be in Falcon and Winter Soldier, which is actually a really. He's not like a character that I follow, heartedly, but I love the story behind him. So that actually was kind of really cool that he's coming to.
We're gonna get it. Just you wait.
Yeah. But in the meantime, for the pandemics, we've got a few minutes left. We're going to talk about, is there anything that we can learn from this? I mean, are we just repeating some of this? Like you were talking about the 1%ers pairing off, and the government, like people just like taking the resources and hoarding and stuff like that. I mean,
this is a thing I've pushed since this whole thing started, which is the idea that selfishness does not work in this situation. Yeah. It's like, because on one end, you've got people who are rich, who are able to survive through these kind of things, and because they can shelter from that stuff, they don't really think about what's going on the ground. And if they had even thought for a second about like, oh, it's more than just us who are in danger, maybe it's all the servants, we can keep this, it's like we can make sure everybody's okay.
Yeah.
It's like especially with this whole story arc. It's like the government left, everybody's factioned off, and everybody's factioned off. It's like nobody can get in or out. The only time that things really started improving is when the government came back in again, which, as much as I'm like, Lex Luthor is just a wealthy rich man.
Yeah.
Technically, he was government.
Right.
So
he did something.
It's like, but what I liked was the community aspect. Was him being able to take all of these different factions of people and say, okay, he didn't just say, oh, you can control this place and do whatever you want. He said, you get this place in exchange for supplying everybody with food.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I think especially in America with individualism, we're so caught in our bubbles, and maybe not just us, but like, we're concerned about just our neighborhood or just this. And
and you see it all the time. And it's like everybody kind of tends to confuse sharing and thinking out, like you said, thinking past the I know what's mine. But then they're like, oh, well, now we're going to communism and what else is it they call it?
Socialism.
Socialism. Yeah. And I'm like, it's not the same, it's
well, and everything's going to hit unequally. I mean, you had, before with other spoiler, you should have just read the book. Babylon Towers eventually gets burned down by the poor people who don't have access to this, who know that this is where it came from.
Yeah.
And it's like it's like, had people been more responsible and more forward thinking, this could have been avoided.
And we're not saying any presidential names here, but
it's like those were the lessons I really took from it, which is,
was there so much that could have been different if people would have been just like straight from the beginning.
Right. It's like, there's got to be some community activism somewhere, because in the end, the rich people were stuck there with the poor people anyway.
Yep.
And it's like, and unfortunately, as frustrated as everyone gets, there needs to be some degree of government intervention until it's fine.
Yeah, that was one of the things, even in Spider Island, that, Jameson was the mayor of New York at the time.
Yeah.
And by the time, he finally let go of his grudge with Spider-Man and stopped blaming him and everything, and he went to go get the cure. They're like, too late, you're already infected. It doesn't work once you've been infected. And he's like, what? So he's like, sorry. They had to turn him away. So,
right.
That was kind of amusing.
Just it's like, we have to be able to think of each other in a broader way than just, these are the people who are taking my food.
Yes.
It's like, we have to, there have been some beautiful things that have come out of this. Like, there are branches of people on Nextdoor and Uber and stuff who are, if an older person a couple doors down says, hey, I can't leave, but I still need to go get groceries, I can get their grocery list, go buy the groceries myself, and deliver it to them.
Yeah.
It's like, and those kind of small things end up making a huge difference. But there's still people out there who are like, I'm going to grab what's mine. I'm going to do things without consideration for anybody else. And it's like, that's not the thing that's going to work right now.
Mm-hmm.
And wearing masks is very important.
That's right.
I cannot. I live with my mom because I'm taking care of her. She's like 80s and she's got medical issues, so she hasn't left the house since this started.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever I go home, I'm wearing a mask while I'm at home with her.
Mm-hmm.
So the only time I take my mask off when I'm at home is in my room.
Yep. And
so,
it's like,
I take my food up there and I eat it in my room. I social distance with her and everything just to make sure she's okay.
Right. No one's asking anybody to like donate $1,000 to anybody. It's just a basic, wear your mask, even here.
And over the nose and cover your mouth. I working at Dragon's there was actually somebody who had it below their nose. And I said, please put your mask above your nose. And then he goes, why? And I was like, well, it doesn't really work if you don't have it covering your nose.
Right.
Like, really? And I was like, yes. So
there's so many PPE tutorials like everywhere.
Yeah,
you can find a nurse and be like, "Tell me."
And wash your hands. Wash your hands on a regular basis. I wash my hands. I can't tell you how many times a day.
Oh, we like you. I said even before you guys come over, I hose everything down here with Lysol and a wipes. It's like it's like even just to have just a couple of people at a time.
You do not want this. If you haven't had this, it lasts like what, 2 months?
Mm-hmm.
Right,
2 months through the entire COVID. That's what it's.
That's assuming you're not already compromised. Even after that, you're still. Yeah,
even after the 2 months, you're still weak.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it takes a long time to recuperate from this. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to be intubated.
Yeah,
I don't want that thing shoved down my throat.
It's like, and that'll be an interesting thing for you guys, because it's like, did the community come together in you guys' stories, or how did they? It's like, obviously you can't get back to normal in a post-apocalyptic story, but
that was actually one of the parts you were talking about, the community coming together. I liked, and so Spider-Man realized that that the Jackal, of course, was handpicking undesirables who were getting the powers and had them go around dressed up like Spider-Man, causing trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And Peter decided, well, the best way he could do it was find all of the community-minded people with spider powers. And so he went out as Peter Parker, pretending like he had gotten infected.
Mm-hmm.
And he encouraged, he went on social media and everything, encouraged everybody. He's like, hey, let's band together. Let's not just go hog wild with these powers. And basically, as Peter Parker, he passed on the with great power comes great responsibility to the community at large and started banding people together. And they started actually having like a street gang kind of vibe where they were all wearing Spider-Man bandanas with the spider symbol on them. And they were going out and doing
cute.
And basically all of the community-minded people who had the powers were like, okay, we're going to protect the locations. We're going to protect the people who didn't get infected. We're going to protect the people from looting. And they started actually biting. It had a slight backfiring effect in that because Dr. Strange had to tell him at the end, he's like, okay, so you remember that little magic spell that you had and we put like this block to keep people up? And I think we just off. Oh.
Yeah.
So I'm going to finish this because Gavin's going to put this on the website while the credits are rolling. It basically made him susceptible to be people figuring out his identity again. So.
All right.
So for those of you who are watching this on the replay, thank you for coming. For those of you who missed it live, I'm sorry, it was a lot to talk about. We look forward to talking to you later and going over some really cool comic book stuff. This has been the Red Web, and good night. You pointed it to me too. I thought, for some reason, I thought I had at least one more minute.